everyone, and welcome to a new Adobe Live session. Today I'm joined by the amazing Chris Bahry, the co-founder of the motion design studio Tendril, who's also the motion mentor and the creative mentorship by Off Academy and Adobe. For those who do not know, the creative mentorship is a 7-month program where we empower young talents to apply and have the chance to win a mentorship by a professional mentor for 7 months long, and they will present their final projects at Off Barcelona. Hi, Chris. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me, Natalie.
Thank you so much for waking up that early. I know you're based in Toronto, but I'm sure you're filled with coffee, adrenaline, right?
Fully loaded. Still have some left.
Amazing. I just want to say also hello to the amazing people who are on the live chat today. We even have Cal Lomax, who is the mentee of Chris, saying hello.
Hey, Cal.
Hey, Cal. It's so good to have you here. It's so good to see some new faces. Joris, Annika. Hi, Oliver. Hi, Andreas. And hi, everyone. We're so excited to have everyone joining us today. Please prepare your questions so we can throw them to Chris during the live stream. So Tendril Studio, my personally my favorite motion design studio. They're experienced in design-driven animation, VFX, and digital innovations, creating beautiful and thoughtful visuals across all mediums. Today, Chris is going to share with us some awesome work that also got released yesterday, actually. So, Chris, please go ahead.
Sure. I've got a little bit of background for those that may not know who the people are behind the studio, and I guess we can start there. And if any questions pop up, that would be great. So these are my partners, the co-founders of the studio. We each play a very different role. As Natalie mentioned, I'm a creative director day to day, so I'm working very closely with our directors and our leads in kind of coming up with the strategies for projects, working with our executive producers, deciding what projects we should or shouldn't do. And on the left, you can see Kate. She's our kind of like the mama of the studio. She holds everything together. And in just to the right of me there is my partner, Alex. He's from Brazil. So we have kind of a Brazilian DNA. Thanks to Alex. And then on the other side there, you see Patrick, who has a background in visual effects, and he brings that piece to the puzzle. And these are our avatars, created by a friend, Christian Hoffman. We been around for 10 years. It's our 11th year as a studio this year, which is pretty exciting.
Are you gonna celebrate the 10th anniversary?
Yeah, we're saying that 11 is the new 10 for ourselves, because last year was obviously a wild ride, and here we are. But yeah, we're definitely gonna do some celebrating this year. We can't wait.
Congratulations, that's amazing. And it's amazing how, like, you know, I know that you have offices around the world with also freelancers also around the world that work for Tendril. So I see here that there's like over 42 members already.
Yeah, day to day, that's the full-time team. That we have a smaller team down in Brazil in Sao Paulo, but the home base is in Toronto. And yep, that there's give or take always around 40 people at the studio, but of course a freelance network of artists around the world. It's a very, very diverse team. Even the team in Toronto comes from like fully across the globe, which is something it's really important to us. We feel like the diversity of the backgrounds and where people are coming from plays a huge role in why the work is what it is and how we can work together and the rest of that.
Amazing.
Yeah. These are the avatars of each of the individuals at the studio that we're looking at here. And like I said, they're from across the planet. Really, they deserve all the credit. Everything you see on the website, everything you see that Tendril creates is created by these awesome human beings. And they're, obviously everyone's working from home right now. We're still all kind of nestled in our home apartments and offices,
Mm.
but we're all looking forward to kind of being back at the studio together soon.
Amazing. And of course, like pre-pandemic times, how were you able to communicate with all your team members? Is it the same? Did you feel any difference between today and back then? Was it always easy for you to communicate between the team members from all around the world?
Yeah, because we have been, had such an international team and have friends and collaborators that are always somewhere far away. It's been it was a little bit of a natural transition for us to be like 100% working from home and always communicating over video. Even Alex and I, when we first met and started working together, my partner, back 15 years ago, he was located in Brazil and we worked remotely together. So you could say the very, very first project that Tendril ever did, in a way, was done remotely. So it's sort of in our blood to do that.
Awesome. So I feel like we're seeing here the development of the studio, right? Like from year one until today.
Yeah. And I put this in here because we actually moved last year, which was really exciting. It was we had been in this space that you see on the left. We grew into that space over the course of our first 10 years, and it started out with in just a one little small room when we first met Kate and Patrick. They were running an editing studio and like a visual effects studio, and Tendril came in, was just like a little baby Tendril. There were 4 of us at that time in that little room you see on the far left.
Wow.
Yeah, and over time grew and changed and evolved, and on the far right is the beginnings of the new space. We haven't actually ever had a day of work in there, but all of our server and our furniture and our books and everything are in that new space now in Toronto.
Amazing. And can we go through some of your work? So for those who are not familiar with Tendril's work, to have a look at it, are we going to talk about this today?
Absolutely. And if there are any particular projects anyone would love to hear a little bit more about, by all means, ask in the questions. For today, I picked out the Cybin project that we released yesterday as something to talk about. There's a bit of background how that came about, and what you're seeing here is a cross section of the work that we created last year. And so you can pretty diverse mix of projects. There are so many sensibilities and different voices at the studio that it kind of comes across in the work in different ways. Sometimes we're working on projects that are more character driven. Sometimes it's a long format piece for a TV series or film, even concepting. And other times it's a motion design piece. Like the core work we do is motion design and motion graphics. But no matter whether we're working on a character piece or a straight up motion design piece or anything else, we try to always approach it in the same way and it's our design process that's consistent across all of those different kinds of projects. We think about them the same way, and we try to put a design lens on everything that we do.
And of course, to maintain the storytelling of the piece as well. We always talk about this with, creative people who work in the motion industry, which is how do you translate the storytelling of the piece itself into a visual story like Tendril does?
There's a kind of a process that we do follow, and it does change depending on the project, but roughly speaking, we kind of follow these general phases. So when a project comes in at the very beginning, whether it's a brief that's very, very specific, or whether it's a brief that's sort of more open-ended, sometimes it's like, for example, let's say it was for a product launch for a new a brand. We do work a lot on technology, new technologies, things that don't exist yet or that are going to be released. And sometimes those briefs come in and there's a little bit of a sense of what the communication strategy should be from the client. Other times there's just, this is what our mission is in the world. Can you help us figure out a way to tell the story? Can you help us figure out a way to communicate it? And of course, we'll start with doing, open research, digging for inspiration, thinking about the problem, talking to the client a lot. We really like to get under the hood with the people we're working with and try to understand the intention and the motivation behind what it is that they're creating, or the product that they've made, or the story they have to tell. And we kind of once we've got a good grasp of the problem or the challenge or the story that we need to tell, we try to break it out into thematic chunks that we call story beats. And then those story beats become the basic framework for later what will become a storyboard or an animatic.
Exactly. It's like the structure or the base of the upcoming project, right?
Exactly. And we can even we can look at how that has played a role as well in the mentorship. One of the things that Cal has been working on in crafting his story for the collector, the very, very first step there was to build out his story beats for that creative structure.
I know. Cal joined us a couple of weeks ago. It was so interesting to hear how he started from scratch and seeing the development he is today. So for those who do not know, Cal is Chris mentee in the creative mentorship by Off Academy and Adobe. He's almost there. I mean, we're in March now. There's over 2 months maybe left for him to present the project, which is called The Collector. And yes, we have seen some of the steps that he did, which right now it translates to the story beats, as you mentioned. And then after the story beats, Chris, I feel like there's the R&D phase. Can you kind of introduce the audience a bit about the term?
Yeah, this is the most important phase. It's also the most fun part of the project as well. And this is where Miro comes to life. We use this tool called Miro really, really intensively on pretty much every project we work on these days. For those that don't know it, it's like a kind of an infinite canvas whiteboarding software where you can have a whole group of collaborators, a team contributing ideas and kind of creating a map of them visually, but with words and ideas. And so what you're seeing here is a Miro board from a project we did last year for Oppo, and this represents really what the fruits are of that R&D phase. So having those story beats in hand and these thematic chunks we know we want to try to explore, the different members of the team, or sometimes 2 people together or a little group together, take on each of those story beats each at a time, and then just go crazy exploring possibilities visually. The story beats, they tend to be they're not overly defined. It creates a sandbox, but without creating, a cage. So there's enough room to really still explore the possibilities of the idea and get away from the references as well. Because the challenge always is, there may be some kind of a visual reference as a starting point, but that R&D phase is where there's an opportunity to kind of get away from the references and really see if that new idea is there, and to find it, we have to go a little deeper, a little further, a little harder, and see, to dig for it and see if we can find it.
And we have here Joris asking, how long are the time spans on R&D usually?
They tend to vary a lot. Sometimes, on this project, this is the Miro board for the ESPN project that we recently launched. It was a big graphic design, motion design package for a sporting event. And with this project, R&D was really important because there was not a traditional narrative. It wasn't like a linear story that needed to be told, or it was more about trying to convey like the essence of the game and the feeling of it. And so to find the right language for that and the right materials, really with almost the whole essence of the project was R&D in a way. Of course, just a shout out to Vitaly Grossman, who was the director on this project.
Woo.
And he did an amazing job, and the rest of the team. But to answer the question, the R&D phase on this was huge. We spent like 2 months doing R&D on this, which is really an exception to the rule. Normally we have 2 weeks rather, or sometimes 3 weeks, but on occasion we'll only have a week, and sometimes we might only have a couple days. And the main point is that even if it's a very short project, even if it's just a 3 or a 4 week project, we're still going to carve out that really important week of R&D just to dig a little further and see if we can find the idea. So yeah, it varies a lot, from anywhere from 2 or 3 days to 3 months, depending on the project.
Great. And we have another interesting question from Bill in terms of R&D before we move forward about the breakdown of the project. So how the costs, how R&D costs are calculated? Meaning like do artists or clients finance it? Does that make sense?
That's a really, really good question. There's 2 kinds of R&D. So R&D on a specific project is part of the plan of the project. So when we budget a project, it's based on time. So we have a certain amount of time we can use, and we, together with the leads and the director, everyone on the team, take the budget we have and we, figure out how much time that means, and then we divide the time up into the phases we know we need to follow. We know we're going to need a production phase. We know exactly how much time. These days, pretty good at estimating, for example, the rendering and that kind of finishing phase. So we map that out. We map out the production, and then based on what the hard, unmovable time costs might be, then we, as much R&D time as we can take, that is put into the project plan from day one. So it's really part of the budget. But we also do R&D at the studio that has nothing to do with a project at all. And that's just the studio pouring love and energy into experimenting and finding new ideas. And, sometimes those might even inspire a client or show up as a reference. We might publish it somewhere on social media, or even on occasion on a Behance page, and it'll come back later on. Yeah. So 2 kinds of R&D, project-based and more just open studio R&D.
That's so interesting. It's a technique that's, especially in a big team like Tendril, I feel like it's a very useful technique for everyone in order to prepare properly before the project. And I also have Catherine here asking about the contingency. Is it also factored into R&D, or is that another process?
Not by contingency. I'm not sure what exactly is meant by contingency. Is there any? Can I ask for like if things go too far, or do you mean if things go a little bit I'm not sure what the.
Sure, no worries. Have Catherine here detail on that in a bit. And I know that Angus is also wondering if the team works on the whole process, or do you have specialists specifically working on the R&D and the story beats, etc. I feel like I also learned myself, because I managed the creative mentorship project, and I learned myself from Cal and how he's working with you guys. I did understand that there are many specialists that take care of specific tasks. Is that right? Or is it like a whole teamwork?
It is a whole teamwork. There are special tasks that might need very, very special particular skills. For example, a good example would be Houdini work. If there's a very particular kind of effect that we're trying to achieve, that needs to be done in Houdini or it's better to do in Houdini, then that will end up on the hands of one of the artists who's comfortable working inside of Houdini. But in the course of a typical project, and this is a great example, there was R&D of so many different kinds of R&D. When we say R&D, it doesn't necessarily mean just a simulation setup in Houdini or a technical setup in Houdini. It can also mean just purely a visual design R&D. So figuring out what the look and feel or the material properties of something could be part of the R&D. Or in this case, there was figuring out how to integrate typography. So much more of like a design R&D task. So I guess depending on whether it's a very, very technical R&D task or more of like a pushing the visual aesthetic, like the aesthetic R&D, there's always room for everyone to be part of that process. They just find everyone kind of grabs onto the thing that they either they're inspired by or they feel like they have the right, generally the right skills to jump onto. It's also very much a conversation when we have a project on the table and those story beats in our hands. We have a chat together as a team and we discuss, who's more interested in taking a crack at that particular R&D versus that one, and everyone gets to kind of choose where they want to put their energy and focus. But there's room for everyone. Even the producers and the executive producers are part of the creative process. So it's very inclusive.
Amazing. So getting back to Catherine's question about contingency, that's my question now. Like, is there room for unexpected or unseen requirements? That's, I guess, what she meant. Like, if something might turn the project into a different perspective, is that also considered in the R&D period?
Yeah, I guess you could say that in some ways that's what the R&D phase is for. It's to give a chance to kind of like test some ideas and prototype them before they go too far, because if and it depends on the project. Sometimes, with a very short turnaround project or where there's a very, very specific narrative structure that needs to be defined, then we're going to be much more defined at the beginning, to the point where there's like a very clear storyboard, and we'll check the storyboard with the client, and then within that storyboard there still might be a little bit of experimentation, but different projects have different degrees of R&D, and the ones that have more R&D tend to be the ones where there's a lot more like unknown at the beginning. There's not a super clearly defined visual aesthetic or story requirement. So we really need that phase to prototype the ideas and kind of see what actually works. Mm-hmm. And also share with the client too. It's very collaborative with the client. So they get to kind of see, what if we try this? What if we try that? And that, that basically lets everyone test something out before committing and committing heavy resources. Once we're in production, we switch from R&D to production. It's really hard to go backwards at that point. So I guess to answer that contingency question, the R&D, you can almost think of it as a way to avoid needing to worry too much about changing directions later in the process where it's much more expensive or difficult.
That's amazing. That's an amazing insight to know and to keep in mind, especially with clients' projects. And we're seeing here now on the screen a kind of like a breakdown of what is an R&D project and what is not.
Yeah, this is something we made internally when we were trying to define why we would do a certain R&D project in like that is self-motivated, and also a way of kind of understanding what are the really important parts of a project puzzle for ourselves. And so there's a technology component to it. The idea that, we're trying to innovate, we're trying to use a piece of technology or a piece of software in an unintended way or in a different way, or we're trying to bridge the digital world, the world of the software and the digital and the technology with the real world, the physical world, sometimes by using, trying to find a way to have inputs like from the real world influence what's happening in that digital world. Or in the case of something like an augmented reality project or a virtual reality project, and there's a lot of talk these days about the metaverse and what that means, just finding ways to bridge those worlds together. And then, of course, for us, we say beauty, but the word beauty is very open. It doesn't mean, one thing. It can mean a lot of things and is very, very individual. But this kind of importance of the craft and the design behind things is a value for us that's really crucial. And then on the right, the thinking and the concept is really, really important. So it's never random. It's never just some kind of a completely random idea. There's always, a strong conceptual core behind everything. That's the reason why we're going to use the technology and the reason why it's going to take a certain visual shape.
Beautiful. It's so interesting to see, how such a big studio can be so humble by sharing all these like techniques that you guys work on internally. And would be able to see the breakdown of oh, is that it? Are we still in the?
We should jump to the Cybin project. Let me jump over there.
I feel like, we have over 30 minutes. I would love to see, because I know that lots of people are excited to see the breakdown of what a typical Tendril project is. So,
let me jump over there. So, let's get crazy. Yeah, some messages from the other side here. We'll talk about the Cybin project that we launched just yesterday. Really, really exciting piece. There's a lot to talk about with this one, so maybe we can dig in a little bit into how this one came together. It'll be a good case study of some of the things we just talked about.
Awesome.
And the process and the R&D. So with this one, it really interesting project. They came to us toward the very, very end of last year, and we worked on it like over the end of last year and into the beginning of this year. Mm-hmm. This project was to share with the world the partnership between these two really, really interesting companies. On the one hand, a company doing research into psychedelics that are becoming mainstream in the world for treating all kinds of mental health issues and things like post-traumatic stress and depression, and also there's potential outside of that as well for the use of psychedelics in society. But the thing about them, of course, is that there's very little science there. It's very new science, new research, and so they're engaging in that. And one way they'll be doing that is by using this very incredible technology created by this second company named Kernel. They've created a very advanced brain imaging device that you can see on the right. And this device is more advanced than, for example, a typical MRI is. It can capture in real time the activity within the brain. And the idea is that with these two companies combined, we'll be able to, in real time, see what the activity is of psychedelics within the brain, and then use that as a launching point for research and science in the future.
Amazing. So Tendril's part here was to kind of like visualize this whole research. And that's when you created the motion graphics behind it, and kind of, we also saw some elements that you also designed.
Yeah, in a way, it was telling that story, trying to find a way to explain, so what's happening here? What are the story pieces that we need to talk about? And so on the one hand, there's the science piece. It was is all based around the research into the molecules that are active in psychedelics. So there's psilocybin is the one we're all familiar with from mushrooms, and that is the where the name of the company Cybin comes from. They're a very new brand. It was also a brand launch for them. So at the same time as being a story, kind of talking about what they're doing, it was also a way of like sharing their new brand with the world and also announcing the partnership. So kind of like a 3-part puzzle. They came to us with this was their brand. They had this idea that each of us is like almost like a work of art. We're one of a kind. Our minds are unique. As individuals, we're unique, and that's a beautiful thing. And so this idea of like a work of art comes across in the brand in the way it's kind of drawn like a signature. And the blue is inspired by the color of the bruising that happens in the mushrooms. So those were some like little clues we had. We were like, okay, so the brand has this promise of, and this essence of like the idea of like uniqueness and one of a kind. And they had this blue as a color. And then we know we had this device as another part of the puzzle piece. And so those became like the basic building blocks for us to start mapping out some very, very early story beats. Maybe I can share the Miro board as well. It might be kind of a cool moment.
Kind of, can maybe just kind of explain what's a Miro? That's also something I learned from your process with Cal and the creative mentorship, the Miro platform. Is that something that I think that should be useful for people who work with clients as well? Can you just kind of like introduce it briefly to everyone?
Yeah, definitely. So Miro, this is it. It's really the best way to think about it is it's like it takes the best of something like a Slack channel and a Pinterest board and a folder full of images and references and ideas and mind mapping and puts them all in one place.
Wow.
So, rather than jumping between a lot of different tools to collect all of the thinking of a project, it all lives in this one space. And that's really amazing because it's because in that space we can see the connections, and it's a very, very collaborative space. So of course I'm the only one in here right now, but if this was an active project, for example, on a daily, we would be in here together as a group, looking together, and you would see all of the cursors of all the different users. Like could be a 10-person team all there together, and we're talking, we're discussing, we're zooming in on an idea, we're having a conversation about why we should do that. But then we remember a piece of reference that we really like, so we can just jump over there and we can dive in and we can have a closer look at that and discuss it, how it relates to the thing that we're developing. Having it all there like that is, I guess, what makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to work, because
Yeah.
that also kind of answers one of the people who asked on the live chat here, like, how do you work with such a big team from your own studio? Like sometimes you need to meet, sometimes you need to discuss, but honestly, seeing this amazing tool, we can also see when people are active and sharing these references. I think this is a really amazing way to kind of like take it from there and work freely without the fact that you have to meet face to face to deliver a project. But in this case, then, in this specific project, I know that you were showing us the Miro side of the project that we're talking about right now, and we're seeing lots of references here. It's amazing.
Yeah, I guess the neat thing about it is it kind of follows the flow of the project. So we start over here. This is how we were looking at some of that early information. Like we kind of figure out, okay, what is our basic task? Okay, we know we need to. In this case, we're creating a short film, basically for the brand that it needs to be very powerful and really capture people's hearts and imaginations. And we just start mapping out some of the things we got from the client. Maybe we got some brand elements. In this case, we had this idea of the uniqueness. So we started thinking about, well, we have this very advanced science and technology. We have this idea of uniqueness and art. So we know we have these three different worlds that are kind of aligning in this kind of amazing way to open up possibility. And after mapping that out, I remember we had we do this too. Associative word exercises is very, very useful. We just try to understand, just using words, what are the essence of the project? What are we trying to communicate? And also, what is it not? You know, technology can be very scary. With this project also, it was and psychedelics can be scary too. It's an unknown territory for a lot of people. And so in this case, we knew we had to, you know, be careful about people's fears about technology, and even just the look of the technology. We had to think about how can we make that feel human and soft. It's amazing. We don't want people to be afraid of it. And when we spoke with the people creating the technology, they really opened up our minds too, because they talked about this kind of thing. Their mission was something really, really amazing. They want to give people the power to understand what's really happening inside of their minds in order to have, you know, better lives, to, you know, and getting under the hood and having those conversations with the client really helped us understand like the mission that we were on, and kind of like really emotionally be part of it, because then ultimately, if that passion isn't there for us, like if we don't really like believe in what we're doing, it's going to be hard to
Go ahead with the project.
Yeah, to get there. And even exactly, yeah. So it's very important to find I guess you could say it's like the emotional core, like the soul of the project for us. And that's all, you know, happens like this in words initially. And then, like you were saying, we start diving into references. We start thinking about like visual mood inspirations, films that have like, you know, we knew music was going to be a really important part of the puzzle. And we came across this amazing video that's just amazing, of a ballerina who had Alzheimer's, who then they play for her the Swan Lake that she used to perform as a young ballet dancer. And then, although she is someone who is unresponsive, the music completely like brings her back to life. And so we started thinking about like how important the musical dimension would be. And it always is with any kind of a motion design piece. The music is a crucial part of the puzzle, but in this case, we knew it would be very, very important.
That's so fascinating. Like there's so much research that goes behind all these projects, and it's fascinating to see that not only your goal is to deliver the project to the client, no, but you get into it so much that you, like you said, that's the emotional core, the passion that you have for this, you know, and it's really amazing to know that and to see how Tendril usually works.
Thanks. Then you can definitely see all that research here. These are, I guess you could say, these were sort of the like the story beats, the themes that we came up with. The actual story structure that we were looking at here was how we mapped it out initially, you know, in terms of like what we might be seeing. But then from there, the research process was trying to figure out, okay, we definitely we're talking about the brain. So how can we make the brain beautiful? What is the brain? Can we make it into a work of art? That led us to discovering a pretty amazing new field of brain research called tractography. And this became one of our big R&D tasks on the project. It turns out that within the brain, we know that there are all the neurons in the brain that you know, make us who we are, and they're located in the center of the brain and also in the outer layers of the brain. But then this new field of tractography has allowed us to visualize how signals move within our brains when we're thinking and moving and doing things, and our memories and our beliefs and everything is in there. And the what we see in those lines is the basically like the underlying wiring, the communication wiring of the brain. It's an amazing,
Wow.
real thing, and we use that as kind of a core area of R&D. You know, that was one of the deeper R&D phases of the project. We actually went and found real tractography data to use and brought it into Houdini, and then used that as a basis for developing some of the activated brain imagery that you see inside the project.
That's crazy. I know. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going crazy. I think I should mute myself. I keep saying wow all the time, and I know that the chat is going crazy here. People are like loving this so much, taking notes. It's beautiful. And is this the so the next step after the R&D is, I guess, the design part, like how that must be like the tricky part, right? Like stopping the research and just get into it. How's that? How does that work?
Yeah, well, actually, that reference phase even comes a little bit before the visual R&D. With this one, we, after having the basic kind of story map and the references in hand, we created a very rough, simple animatic, and just generally sort of blocked out the scenes. We at this stage, there are a lot of ideas at this stage that we ended up, if you look at the final film, got like completely thrown out of the boat, but that we were still exploring at this stage. One of the big ones was the environment of that everything was going to live in. Whenever we're working on a project, whether it's like a film for Microsoft or whether it's a short film or anything that we're doing for a narrative piece, the world that the story lives in is really important. So we're always thinking about like the environment and the architecture. And with this film, it was a similar process. One of the big things we did at the beginning was start thinking about, where do these things exist? What is the backdrop for all of this? Well, on the one hand, we played around with visual experiments where we're just living in a blank world where we have a kind of a neutral background, like a gradient, more of a graphic look and approach. But then we felt like that didn't have enough a context. And so we started thinking about what kind of an environment would make sense. And we started thinking about, well, it should be an environment that feels scientific, but also promotes health and wellness and kind of resonates this idea of like inner well-being, basically. And we created this thing, these environments here that we were calling the Temple of the Mind. And the idea was almost like a Zen-like space that could be the environment within which all of these things would be happening, the device, the brain activity, and everything else. But over the course of the project, we realized that this environment was too dominant of an idea to fit into the story we were trying to work with, and we ended up not using it at all. But what we did do is we used the essence of it and the idea of this light and these kind of layered fins as a backdrop for all of the shots. So if you look at the film in its final form, you can see shots like this where there's just like a little bit of a hint of that kind of layered environment. So even though the full environment's not there in the film, the kind of like the essence of it is still there somewhere.
Amazing. We just shared the link on the chat so people can see the final project. It was just released yesterday, so we're so grateful, Chris, that we're getting full-on insights for the first time today, especially about this project. That's amazing to hear. And just kind of like, I know that in this project you didn't have to shoot any specific product or anything that needed a real shoot. So I have a question here from Bill about the Microsoft project that you guys did recently. Was that a real shoot though? Like, or in case when you have to confront the idea of shooting a real object, how did you face that? What's the solution of it?
Are we talking about the I'm curious which Microsoft project?
The 365.
This one here?
Let me check.
Maybe this
Yeah,
one?
exactly. Yeah.
And the question is, there's no project or the product there, or real live action shooting.
Yeah, sorry. I was pretty fast here. Not what the question is that, first of all, like, did you have to have a real shoot of the product and this specific project? And if not, when you face the challenge of having to have a real shoot, what would be the solution for that usually in your work?
Oh, okay. That's a really cool question. We do have to shoot sometimes. It really depends. There are some projects that have more need for live action than others. Quite often, live action or the need for live action and this is a good example, comes from the need to have a human element. The one the biggest challenge for us in the motion design world and everybody and anyone working in 3D is we can make these beautiful objects move and inanimate things come alive and make the whole world come alive. But then where are all the people? It's very hard to have a sense of humanity, even as much as you make the technology tactile. It's very hard to feel like there's a human presence unless there's some kind of humanity there. Mm-hmm. And I guess the two levels of that are, one way we've been doing that in the 365 project that was mentioned just now. And also you can see it a little bit in this AutoStore film we made last year, was we've been using hands a lot. So we've created like a very beautiful 3D hand rig, and we have male and female and different like backgrounds and diversity in the hand, and that has actually been a really nice solution for when we can't go into a full live action mode, because live action carries a lot of costs, of course, as well. Not most projects, it can be a challenge if we're also doing a lot of animation. So a nice middle ground sometimes is just to find some other way of in putting some humanity in there. Sometimes even just having a cursor or some sense of like the human like interacting with an interface is enough. But we are finding like a hand really like brings a human presence. And if we can't, if it's a case where we need to go even further and truly have live action, then there are a few different ways we'll handle it. In the case of this particular project for AutoStore, if I go and dig it up here on the website, we actually ended up doing a little shoot. And in this case, we built and designed the set ourselves. We found a small photo studio in Toronto.
Amazing.
I'll scroll down to it. Maybe I can show you. There we go. So we and it was it's deceptively simple. We only had basically one wall to use for this shoot. So it was a very small photography studio environment, but it had a really beautiful glass wall. And so we looked at it and realized that actually, if we kind of install and design a set on that wall, we can make it feel like a much bigger environment than it actually is. And we'll frame it with longer lenses, and we'll build these user interfaces. We animated graphics, and we worked on this project with our friends over at Worship Studio in Toronto. Just a shout out to them, awesome friends that we love collaborating with, and that have actually designed the Tendril brand originally.
Oh, great! Yeah.
But we created these animated user interfaces, and then on the set in live action, this was an iPad. This was a TV, and we had our actors interacting with those screens live in camera. But it was all really taking place on just this like simple one-walled set, and we had My wife is a costume designer, designed the wardrobe, kind of custom uniforms for the actors, and that was our way of like bringing a little bit of like a human element. And we had just one day to shoot it, like a 6 or 7 hour day shoot, and kept it like very simple and kept the costs down. But it gave us the human piece that we really needed, and otherwise it would have, the story would have it would have really been lacking something, because we didn't want to tell a story about just the robots and just the technology. It was about the technology making people's lives better and making people's lives more efficient. And so there was no way to tell it without people.
Of course. I mean, once
Sorry, long answer, like a small question.
No, that's amazing. It's just it's a really good breakdown, because it is hard. It is, like you said, it's very cost efficient, of course, because you need to, because when you're talking about the user experience, you have to showcase, like you said, the human presence, and Bill thanks you. He thanks you so much for such an amazing answer. So yeah,
you're welcome.
So we have more or less 10 minutes left, Chris. Should we kind of go back to the amazing project that you released yesterday, and see
Sure.
kind of to understand like how does Tendril get to the final, let's say, the final step of presenting a project? Like, what are these final decisions that you had to take? Are there any challenges that you learned from that you could share with us today?
Sure. I guess, once the phase that follows that R&D phase is really the production phase. And I guess these are a good example of like what goes just before that phase. We create pretty refined style frames for each of the main sections. So we have like a very clear visual map of what we're doing. And then from there, when we're diving into the full-blown production phase, we're going in with like a really, really clear sense of what we're doing, and we can stay on track. There's still the opportunity that things do change. One of the things that was a challenge to figure out was at the beginning of the project, we weren't sure how much of a role how important it would be necessarily to show the molecule itself, or how literally we would have to show the molecule. And so that was something that was definitely an interesting creative challenge. We had spent a lot of time developing this neuron mapping and the brain mapping. We knew how we were going to handle the device and the visuals of the device. It was all based on light. So the way that device works is it sends pulses of light in through those sensors in that helmet that's on your head, and then those little smaller sensors detect the light that's coming back. So it was, the thing that was nice about that was like, wow, great. So if we can use light. And the idea that this is like, using light to reveal information as a way to take the harshness away from the technology, and like softening the materials, and giving it a little more of like a kind of a humanistic feel. And when it gets into the nitty gritty, I mean, one of the things that was another thing maybe that was interesting to note with this one is the blue and the balance of like how blue and how consistent we wanted that to be throughout. It was, we knew the blue was a really important brand color, and we knew it, possibly at the end that we would be showing that color, but we wanted it to be like a visual theme, like through the whole piece. So it like would like really resonate with that idea of the brand in Cybin.
Yeah.
And that was something that took some fine tuning and dialing. We initially had some sections that weren't quite so blue, or we had different colors in play. And I would say only toward like the very kind of close to the end of the project did we get to that point where we could see enough of it that we could say, okay, we need more blue here, less blue there, and kind of make a a contact sheet of all of the shots that we're building, and then look at that as a group. That's something that we find really, really helpful. If you have 20 or 30 shots that you're building for a film, seeing them all together in a grid as a contact sheet is a really, really nice way to kind of get that extra level of dialing and fine tuning that you can't really do if you're just looking at things on a shot by shot basis only. I don't know if that answers that question very well, but.
That's beautiful. Like, I mean, we're getting into so many details here that people on the chat are saying we need Chris for over 5 hours. 1 hour is not enough. So your answers are really, really, really helpful.
That's
and
awesome.
And we're seeing how much work and effort is being put into behind this, beautiful visual piece. That I can't wait for everyone to check out after the stream. We already shared the link over here, and yeah. So what's next, Chris? Is there any awesome project that you guys are working on, or?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. We are doing a bunch of R&D right now. One of the things we're really excited about is this work that we're doing, which is in collaboration with Microsoft as well, and it's questioning what an avatar should and can be. So, when we think of an avatar, it can be anything from a very realistic kind of representation, figurative human representation that we're used to, all the way across the spectrum to something that's extremely abstract. And for us, as character artists, this has been a really interesting journey. This is a map of the character work that we've worked on and the characters we've brought to life over the course of those years. And they've taken on many different shapes and forms. And something we've been really focusing on the past year has been to try to find a very specific way of approaching characters from a design perspective that feels very, very unique to Tendril and to the studio, and that resonates with the values that we have, but also questioning as well what a character needs in order to be expressive. And with the case of the avatars, it's a very, very interesting exploration, because it's made us really have to think a lot about what are the basic requirements for expression and communication. What are the rules behind that? How can we decide what allows a human being to recognize a face? And we have this sort of evolutionary wiring to see faces. Everybody has had that experience of like seeing a face in a thing. It's a natural human phenomena. And on the course of developing this project, we were able to kind of play with that and understand, depending on where we place an eye or how those eyes are positioned in space, what does that do? Like, do we still read the face? We also have, in the course of this project, have been experimenting with how many parts there should be, because if there are too many objects or too many layers, it becomes kind of like a visual mess and you don't read the face anymore. If there are too few, it's not enough. It's too abstract. So it's like really a process of distilling things down kind of to the bare minimum. But what we would love to do and what we're so excited about is the idea of a generative real-time system for avatars and expression that is driven by the user, driven by the person who will be using this as an avatar in like the context of Teams or like a video chat or any other kind of place where you would want like a graphic representation of yourself. So it would be like a real-time avatar, user-generated tool.
That's so interesting. I'm so curious to see the project once it's launched. That's so it's under production right now.
Under production and a kind of an ongoing exploration. If you look on, I would encourage everyone who's interested in the Microsoft work, who doesn't already know about it, to check out Microsoft at microsoft.design. You know, a big shout out there to Nando Costa, who is like really the visionary of all of this. And actually, he's the reason why me and Alexandre met on the first place. We know each other because of Nando. So he's the visionary behind the Microsoft design project overall. And there's, you know, many studios and artists from around the world that are involved in building that language. And right now, this particular project is in a very, very early stage. You can see testing out the idea with users to say, you know, would you use an avatar like this? Is this interesting? Like, what kind of, you know, how realistic do you feel you would want an avatar to be? Or would you prefer something very creative and not following all the biases and preconceived ideas we might already have about what an avatar should be? So that process of like getting feedback from people is important for this one, because it won't just be like a motion design piece, but rather like a thing for people to use. Yeah.
It's
so feedback important.
Yeah, of course. And now that we're more invested in the digital world more than ever, this is really interesting. We can't wait to see where this research is gonna develop. But Chris, this was amazing. I mean, I'm blown away. The people on the chat are also like very grateful for all the amazing tips that you shared with us today. And I want to thank you again so much for joining us on Adobe Live on Behance. It was such an amazing learning experience. I want to thank everyone also who joined us today in the chat. We've seen some beautiful new people and some old fans, and of course your number one fan, Cal Lomax, your mentee.
Awesome.
Which we can't wait to see the process of his project, his creative mentorship project very soon. But yeah, so please don't forget, guys, that we have a Discord channel where you can keep the conversation going. It's a beautiful Friday, noon, afternoon, wherever you are, evening. So I'm so happy to see the community, you know, getting engaged between each other. So please, Tim will share with us the link in a few so you can join in. So yeah, thank you again, Chris. Don't forget, guys, that we are live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Just gonna go quickly through the schedule for next week. Next week on Monday, we have the part 2 of Rush Hour with Sophia and Maddie. They're gonna be exploring more of Rush app. On Tuesday, we have Wednesday. Oh my God. Sorry, guys, probably because I'm running fast. So on Wednesday, we have the masterclass by Tim, of course, who's going to show us some Adobe Dimension tricks. And then on Friday, we have another session about working from home. Just kind of, but with Emma, with amazing Emma, who's going to be back on the stream, and Emily Satska. Hope I'm saying her name right. But yeah, so this is the schedule for next week. Do join in. I will be back in a couple of weeks also as part of the creative mentorship schedule with a special guest that we will also announce next week. So thank you so much, guys. Happy Friday. Bye, Chris. Take care.
Thanks. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much, Natalie. Bye.